Hello and welcome to Extreme Perspectives. This is a monthly podcast created by the Sense Network to bring you conversations with people who see things differently and think differently. This podcast is for people who want to expand their mind and develop their creative intelligence. I'm your host, Jeremy Brown. For 20 years, I've been seeking out people from the edges of culture, the creators, outliers, misfits, rebels, and the crazy ones. People who want to change things and push the human race forward. In this episode of Extreme Perspectives, I speak with Misfit, Doctor of Social Science, Cognitive Diversity Expert, and Sense Worldwide team member, Dr. Adam Kitt. Adam leads the research and development team at Sense Worldwide. Through collaborations with University College London and the Sense Network, he and his team are exploring the science behind breakthrough innovation. The result is a cognitive diversity algorithm that enables Sense Worldwide to ensure the right perspectives are included at the right stage of the innovation process, where they have optimal impact. Hello, Adam.
Hi, Jeremy.
I'm very pleased we're getting a chance to have a conversation today because we have lots of conversations, but this conversation is for the Sense Network and for all of our other listeners who have probably heard us talk a little bit about cognitive diversity. And today, I think we're going to take a deep dive on that and start to unpack it a little bit and talk about why we're so excited about it. But before we do that, as you know, these podcasts always begin with the same question. Are you an outlier, a misfit, a rebel, or a crazy one?
No, I have actually put some thought into this, probably too deeply into what is the difference between a outlier and a misfit. And I think what I settled on originally was probably somewhere between a rebel and a misfit, but I think I'm concluding I'm going for misfit.
Now you got to tell me why you're a misfit.
I think the reflection for me was that although I definitely kind of appeal to having some crazy ideas or crazy kind of life experiences, for me, I think being a misfit means always feeling a little bit different, always kind of feeling that you don't quite fit in. And it's really kind of been a personal journey for me to figure out where is my tribe. And I think I've always kind of had that question, and it's probably something that kind of intrigued me about the Sense Network and Sense Worldwide as having a community of misfits and creatives and odd people from around the world that maybe there is my tribe.
Excellent. Maybe you could just, by a quick introduction, tell us a little bit about your journey which led you to the door of Sense Worldwide.
I guess, well, what I am in Sense Worldwide at the moment, we've been there for a year now, and I run the R&D works using research to help develop applied innovation tools and new insights and technologies, really orientated around the idea of cognitive diversity, creative intelligence, and breakthrough innovation. And our kind of key question is, how do we enable individuals and teams and organizations to be more innovative, more creative through the power of cognitive diversity? I mean, I've been in academia for most of my working career and education. I've always been really interested in people and what makes people tick and what makes people different and their motivations, and specifically personality theory. That's been my kind of keen interest over the years. Probably what propelled me to do a Bachelor's of Science in psychology. And during that time, I really wanted to be a clinical psychologist. So I was working in kind of neuropsychology, biological psychology, developmental psychology, clinical and counseling, drug addiction, and that was really interesting to me. I think I've always liked helping people. So I was doing that at Leeds Beckett at the time and working as a independent social worker for a small social working company where I was helping the vulnerable population kind of develop and grow, working with people with hoarding problems, with challenging mobility issues, kind of helping people learn technology who had autism, who needed their needs. And that kind of led me into a 3-month kind of placement in Sri Lanka, helped the vulnerable populations over there. That was really interesting to me. And I think what I kind of learned through all that experience was what became really apparent to me was that there are two ways in which you can help the world, and there is the alleviation of human suffering, which was really what I was kind of engaging in at the time, trying to become a clinical psychologist or aspiring to be a clinical psychologist. And then there was the opposite, which is what makes people geniuses, what makes people creative, different, unique, and the best that they can be. And this kind of concept of flourishing, human flourishing came up, which kind of dove me deep into the area of positive psychology, which I found super, super interesting. This how do we kind of study what makes people unique and creative and geniuses? So I kind of shifted my kind of focus to flourishing teams, flourishing organizations, where I did a master's in organizational behavior, learning how to apply these motivational and personality theories to teams and team dynamics, what makes leaders the best that they can be, what makes teams the most creative that they can be. And after that, decided that I wasn't done learning and did a PhD in HRM, so human resource management, which was really focused on, for a long time, the psychology of people in teams and also creative cultures, so cultures of innovation, and how we can create the context in which people can do their most creative work. And also, a big part of that was to learn about people's differences, their life experiences, and how that kind of led them to see things differently. And during that time, I was working in Nottingham Trent University Business School, helping organisations do research-led consulting in terms of leadership development and creative teams. I think what I really learned there was that there was a real gap in academic world where I kind of still didn't find my tribe again. What I learned was great research was research that led from insight to action. And that was something that I felt was partially there, but not there as much as I would like it to be in academia, which is why I kind of turned to the world of consulting, where I could have a more of an impact. And kind of, as I said at the start, Sense Worldwide really jumped out to me because of this amazing community that we have, this community of misfits, outliers, creatives, and rebels that I thought was quite inspirational and was, in a way, harnessing a lot of what the academic world was saying but not preaching.
Let's strip it right back and let's start with how we define cognitive diversity.
Well, cognitive diversity is really the inclusion of people who have different styles of thinking, different problem solving, and different ways of seeing the world in which they can provide unique perspectives because they see and think differently. And we really know that these differences between people creates this alchemic reaction that leads to better, stronger, and more relevant ideas for the world.
And where this is sort of where we see the application of this most is in teams, specifically innovation teams, because certainly over the last decade we've heard a lot from the behavioral scientists who have told us about bias and all of the disadvantages of bias. And I think some of what we're doing here is actually looking at some of the benefits of bias by bringing people in who sort of see things differently and can kind of start to get, certainly organizations can be in that sort of entrenched cognitive entrenchment and need to see things differently. And that's where this is most useful. Now, that might sound like stating the obvious, but actually what we're talking about here is not just bringing in an external perspective, but, how we can actually start to think about, what are those specific types of people and how do we start to optimize different activities. So whether that might be if you are trying to think about things differently or you're trying to discover new problems to solve, it can obviously be very useful at that stage. But similarly, when you're ideating and when you want people to build on those ideas, how radically different can you start to think in terms of how people build on those ideas? Or when it comes to evaluation, we certainly know from Adam Grant's work that he writes about challenge networks, or the ability of creators to understand novel ideas and to actually evaluate them more effectively than, say, managers or focus groups can, because that's all about overcoming some of those biases and the effect it can have on the outcomes and the results.
And I think there's a really interesting kind of almost dichotomy in the research today, which is it seems that we've got this real press for kind of cultural fit and making sure everybody kind of causes this cohesive unit. But it seems like what the literature and what the research is actually telling us is that actually differences are really important. And it's about those differences between the people. And in a way, you kind of mentioned bias. It's about how do you make the right bias at the right time. Now, what we know by cognitive diversity is that you can create these organizations that everyone is really homogenous. They think the same way. They're all aligned. Okay, great. You have a nice, happy culture. But actually, it's the challenge between teams. It's the creative conflict. It's the exposure to different ways of thinking, different ways of working that encourages people to generate new ideas, to come together and put ideas in new combinations and configurations which were previously out of reach. And in a way, that exposure kind of leads to two things. It leads people to first generate new ideas, as we just said, but also challenge existing ideas and challenge existing frameworks in a way that either strengthens the rationale for those frameworks or encourages people to think about those ideas very differently. And I think that's a really interesting thing, and in a way it challenges our thinking around how do we identify what those differences are between people? How do we make sure that we have the right people in the room and not just a group of yes men? How do we make sure as leaders do we create the right conditions for people to come together and express these differences and hold that space where creative conflict leads to this breakthrough innovation rather than the kind of destructive damage, which I think is the fear of many people and many leaders today. So we have all this kind of it's kind of well established that cognitive diversity leads to innovation. Over the past 10 years, there's actually been kind of an upsurge of research in the area. And it seems that actually there's an untapped potential for us to actually identify what those differences are, and how do we then apply that to innovation in the world in which innovation actually happens. So this idea around that, how do we tailor organizations and groups and networks to be able to form those teams or form those kind of collective perspectives that can really be tailored to the different demands of an innovation challenge, be it the stage of innovation, ideation versus evaluation, or even the type of innovation that's occurring, technology, or maybe it's product or consumer-led innovation. There really seems to be a difference in the type of requirements that our teams have and the networks have, in which kind of requires us to shape teams very differently than what's been happening in the past and what's been happening as almost a status quo.
Yeah, and just to recap on our journey so far, you've been heading up R&D now for 12 months, but the research and development at Sense Worldwide started a few years before that in our first collaboration with UCL, University College London. And we've obviously successfully been harnessing cognitive diversity for the best part of 20 years with a lot of the work, a lot of the innovation work that we've done. And we wanted to take some of that data around the people that we worked with to see if there were any patterns, or if they're we had sort of practical first-hand knowledge, like the tacit knowledge, if you like, the practical knowledge of it working, but we didn't have any science to underpin that. And in fact, one of the reasons that we've started working together is those initial experiments were very successful in starting to give us some clues about what we've been getting right, and can we start to actually get even better at putting teams of people together, and even better at focusing cognitive diversity in the right way, depending on those different stages. So I just wondered if we might just take a step back in time, and it would be really great to hear sort of what your perceptions have been of those different milestones that we've reached as a business. Because certainly one of the first things that we did was to look at a load of old projects that were successful, that we had data on. And then we started to actually look at, what makes the Sense network so radically different from any other network that's out there.
Just kind of casting back to a year ago when I joined, I think we were very much collaborating with UCL and our research collaborations. And I think we were seeing some really promising academic results to underpin, as you said, the tacit knowledge and the crystallized knowledge that we held for a business for over 20 years of working with innovators. And I think the first real kind of project beyond that I kind of took on was Project Codename Babylon. Project Babylon was to really enhance these ideas and to take them a step forward into applied innovation tools. Now, what we did, one of our first collaborations with UCL was with Kamila Jasinska, who was doing business analytics at UCL for a master's, and she was really interested in understanding the personality traits of people in our past projects. And she, for her research, she developed this machine learning model that was able to predict up to often 85% accuracy the personality traits of individuals on our projects. And what she found was that the most successful projects tended to have higher cognitive diversity scores. So we developed this formula to measure cognitive diversity and how we looked at the differences between these personality traits, and found out when these differences were maximum, also when these differences were the most between people, actually it led to more successful breakthrough innovation projects. And this was a really fascinating finding, because it really confirmed a lot in which what we do at Sense Worldwide is really tailor our research journeys and our projects and our innovation projects around this idea of cognitive diversity. And what we had been doing intuitively as consultants and as leaders of the Sense network was putting together these people with different traits, and this research really confirmed that. From that, we really set out with a kind of few objectives, which were: who are the Sense network and why are they so special? And also, how can we take this a step further to try and tailor the most cognitively diverse teams that we could? So we actually manually coded about 700 responses from all our past projects. So for those unfamiliar with our projects, we go through several stages, and the first is we design creative exercises for sensors, people in the Sense network, to go through and provide their responses. And then what we look for is really mind expansion. So we're looking for the differences, and we're looking for unique perspectives to these questions. It could be like, what is the future of decentralized finance? Or it could be, how does luxury, what does luxury mean in your life? These kind of provocative questions. And we coded about 700 of these responses on the measure of mind expansion, which was a measure we developed internally, which was really about breakthrough perspectives. So ideas that had either not been expressed before, they were imaginative, unusual, surprising, they were deeply insightful or reflective, but ultimately they allowed us to see a problem in a different way. And we then kind of conducted a supplementary data a survey to the Sense Network, looking at the relationship between all those different traits and life experiences, and also the way in which individuals were to answer these questions through mind expanding ideas, or teams together holistically develop mind expanding ideas. And we really confirmed what Camilla found. And most interestingly, this score that we were able to generate seemed to have an optimum level of cognitive diversity for innovation. So, too little cognitive diversity, and it seemed that innovation suffered, and too much cognitive diversity, and innovation kind of suffered again. And it seems that the literature actually confirms that, because when you have too little differences between people, breakthrough ideas don't happen, but too much, and they conflict too much. And we also kind of found what the insights were, that we found that cognitive diversity were the more cognitively diverse groups in our projects, the more likely it was that our clients and the people who were leading the projects were to bring out those ideas and share them with C-suite, share them with the wider organization in a way that they were led to greater levels of adoption. But I think probably the most kind of interesting thing that we found was that the Sense Network really over-indexed in a specific trait of intuition. And I think it was something like about 60% extra. So in addition to the kind of the normal standard in the global population, the Sense networks, the people on our projects were really had strong trait intuition. This cognitive style that is embodied or characterized by people who are visionary, they notice the big picture and how everything connects. They're creative problem solving. They're embracers of novelty and originality. They like exploring what if questions and future possibilities. And this was something that I thought was quite magical, because it really kind of showed that the benefit of the Sense network and the magic of the Sense network, and who the Sense network was in terms of how they identified themselves, but also how they thought and what they were really bringing into projects as well. Their ability to see things differently, which was really not found in the general population, and it's massively over-indexed in the Sense network.
One of the most beautiful things about it is so often we talk about the bell curve, and we're working with people who are at the edges of that bell curve. But it actually, when you, as you said, when we looked at the global population distribution of these personality types, it was pretty much a perfect bell curve. But when we plotted the Sense network on that, it was the absolute inverse. And it created a really great big smile, not just across the chart as a flip of the bell curve, but I think it put a smile on all of our faces as well when we saw that, because it was about having some data to support that we really do have such a unique community, and such a valuable community. And I think that the irony of this is, businesses need this more than ever, but these are the very people that businesses have sort of been designed to kind of encourage not to be in the organization. They do, organizations do not foster the conditions where these individuals thrive. And we've probably got, decades of cost driving efficiencies and kind of personality profiling to drive these efficiencies that have actually driven these individuals out of the organization. So I'm pleased that we've been able to corral these outliers elsewhere.
I think that's a really interesting perspective, because where someone has been shunned, or where people have kind of really not been turned away because they're either non-compliant, or they challenge the status quo, or they're too disruptive, they found a home in the Sense network. And they found a space where their voice is valued, and we listen to them, and they're actually helping us drive the future of innovation and of innovations, by providing this unique perspective that seems to not have found its home elsewhere. I think this is really compelling as well, because I know there's a lot of research right now that's trying to find how it's recognizing the neurodivergent individuals in the workforce that are really, it's been seemed or it's been perceived to be in a way a challenge to fit those people in. They need accommodations or they have some kind of needs in which, it becomes difficult to fit them in. But actually, these people have superpowers. And in a way, it's kind of it's that thread of reasoning. If you can provide the context for these people to thrive, whether it's their own office or you take meetings virtually or you provide quieter environments with no distractions, whatever it is, you can harness the superpowers in individuals and find them to give them a place where their voice actually means something and cherish that. And if you can do that, you're going to be far more innovative and appreciative as an organization for the people who are actually kind of driving the ways in which you can see your products, your services, your technologies really differently.
A quick break from this month's episode. If you're enjoying the conversation, remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to dive into the back catalogue for more mind-expanding perspectives from the edges of culture. Rather than just looking at what the differences are, how do we measure for what those positive traits are that are valuable? And then how do we best combine those with other people? And as you said, it's about creating the right conditions. So sort of what are the values and ways of working that we can bring these people together in a really constructive way? So it's not like anyone needs to pussyfoot around anyone. We've just got a shared set of universal values that we can just walk into a room. We know what the conditions are that have been set. Tasks, activities have been designed to enable anyone, however they think about things or however they see things, to be able to articulate those thoughts. And that's a lot of the things that we are trying to do. It's not just about individuals. It's about the collective and that combined effort and actually the exponential effect that can have on our creativity and also our ability to evaluate these ideas too. So this is not just about, thinking crazy ideas. This is about really practical ways of going through the innovation workflow, if you like, to optimize how we perform at each of those stages. And whether that is supplementing an internal team or building an entirely radical team, well, a little bit like what Astro Teller was doing at Google X. He famously says in one of his articles that he tells the story about Willy Wonka and the Oompa Loompas. And they wouldn't survive in the wild. So this is why he had to create an environment for them to thrive. And I think that's actually the role this is really what we're talking about, is creating those conditions. So, different people can come together and combine their ideas and stretch, challenge and build on those ideas as well. So it totally is supercharging our innovation processes.
Well, there's a lot there, but I think the first kind of point is that when you go into the literature and the research, there's so many different ways in which people are measuring cognitive diversity, and it seems to be incredibly simplistic. It's either like one trait or it's one activity that they do that's rated on like a binary scale, or and really it's just a measure simply of how different are the people in your team. And I think that it poses an academic challenge for people to say, well, what are the differences between people? What are the real unique life experiences and heuristics and thinking styles that actually are important rather than just perceived or thought about? And then the next question, which seems to have not been applied at all, is how do you actually use this information? Okay, we know that differences between people are really important, and okay, they lead to more great breakthrough innovation. They challenge people. People think differently. Previous ideas become built on and even better and more applicable to the world. Okay, great, but like, what does that actually mean for leaders and practitioners in the world today? And where we're going really is the next step. I think we're going 3 steps higher, which is, first of all, we're applying it specifically to innovation, which is quite amazing in terms of what are the individual differences that lead to people to be more creative and innovative rather than just higher performing. The second is that we're applying it to different stages of innovation. So it's very clear that, for example, someone who is seen as I'm going to use the word idea generator, someone who likes to brainstorm new ideas, they bring a lot of ideas to the table. They're probably very open to ambiguity or open to wild and unconventional perspectives. That probably isn't as valuable in when you've defined the idea and you need to implement it, because at that stage actually going back and re-rehearsing everything and kind of trying to add new things in the mix isn't helpful, and vice versa. The last thing that you need, and when you're trying to kind of go through discovery and generate your ideas, is someone who's really critical and thinking about all the implications of those ideas, because they're just saying, oh, I'm not sure about that doesn't seem like a good idea. But in that stage you need to withhold those those judgments, because you never know which idea could be the most valuable in that moment. So there's that stage, and the third is context matters. Absolutely, you need to create the conditions, the set of values and ways of working in which these people can actually go ahead and challenge one another, and to appreciate the differences, and as individuals recognize their strengths. What is it about me that makes me so good in this team, in this environment, in this innovation stage? But also, what is it about the team, and how is it that we can create the creative context, the container in which creative ideas can flow without being too disruptive for one another or even harmful, which creative conflict can happen if you don't have those right conditions. And when we talk about that, we talk about creative intelligence, a culture of creative intelligence.
From what you're saying, this is particularly valuable to early stage innovators who are often seeking unexpected or unknown territories that they may not be in today. So not the known knowns. And it's helping them, also from their perspective, how do you assess ideas that may be coming online in 3 to 5 years or 5 to 10 years even? How do you begin to evaluate that? You can't do that with a mainstream audience. And yes, if this is disruptive, if this requires technology, we know there is a lead time and there is time taken to actually make this stuff. So maybe you could just talk us through how, at a high level, how we might apply cognitive diversity at a couple of the different stages you might go through. So, for example, maybe we could talk about discovery, or, when we're doing deep dives. So often people go and just talk to their consumers today, but what are we doing differently? And then ideation and then evaluation. I mean, most people go through those stages. There's many other things that need to be done, we know, but it might just be good to just provide a high level kind of overview of how we are applying cognitive diversity in different ways to those innovation stages.
A really interesting kind of finding that's coming out for us is that this idea of the balance between cognitive diversity and cognitive symmetry. So it seems that actually cognitive diversity, so the maximizing the differences between perspectives between different people in your innovation teams, is more valuable at certain stages of the innovation process. So, for example, the standard kind of early stage innovation process typically goes through a process of generating ideas, so becoming really open to new possibilities, taking those ideas and defining the problem, defining the problem that really needs to be solved, whether it's a consumer or technology related problem, then beginning to open up the aperture again to ideate and around those solutions, and what is it about opening up around that particular challenge or problem, and then evaluating, so selecting and prioritizing which are the best ideas that we can take forward to implementation. In our structure at Sensible Wide, we go through these research stages in our projects, and we call it mind expansion, thinking really wide; deep dive, going deep into consumer needs; co-creation, bringing people together to build on those ideas; and evaluation, so again, figuring out which of those ideas are the best and most applicable. And I kind of touched upon this before, like, for example, when you're in mind expansion, or people might know it as discovery, you really need teams who have those traits that are allow them to be really open to new ideas and to see things very differently. So they might come from all different points of life. They might be really open. They might be unconventional. They might have high openness to experience. They might be creative, imaginative. In our research, we often find they're very intuitive. They uncover these hidden connections and possibilities. And that's very different from the later stages, but that's when you really want to start maximizing your cognitive diversity in that very front stage of discovery. Maximize those differences between the people.
And say, so at this stage of discovery, it's all about being open to everyone and everything.
Exactly that.
What are you looking for in ideation? Because one of the things that I often think about is, if we are collaborating with, say, 20 people on a project, so there's we've gone wide at the very beginning, then we begin to narrow that down to the people that we're working with. I often think about the ideation stage. It's almost like a multiplier effect. It's like cognitive diversity squared. So maybe if the deep dives is like the square root, where you go very deep to the root of what the issue is, what we're doing here is almost looking to square it. So, there's 20 people who can all come up individually with an idea, but what happens when all of those different cognitively diverse perspectives of those 20 people then start to interpret and build on the other 19 people in that group, and then they take what they've observed from those 19 and then apply it back to their ideas as well. And then that's where effectively you get to 20 squared. It's like a very powerful way of building out new concepts and new ideas.
Absolutely, and that's why we can call this like co-creation or collaboration, this ideation phase. I think, just as a bit of an interesting insight, is something that we found from some of our most latest research, was that in the groups which had high levels of social conformity, innovation, the ideas that were generated were far less innovative. And now, in this way, what it kind of highlights is that this kind of, when you put people, and there's tons of classic research to support that, when you put people in a room, they conform to the most normal or mainstream idea. And that if you have this degree of collectivism or social conformity in your groups, people tend to orientate closer to that idea. It injects bias. Psychologists would know the Asch experiment, but there's tons of research to show that essentially put people in a group together, they tend to be kind of less innovative, especially if there's not the conditions that differences can be altered. And so in this section, in co-creation or ideation, you've allowed people to express their individuality, those differences and ideas that come out to different solutions or different perspectives around a problem. But now you add them all together and you see what happens when people are allowed to test and build and iterate on each other. And in that way, they become squared. So really interesting is that it's actually beneficial for you in a way to generate ideas alone or your team and then come together, rather than start the brainstorming process at the start, which I think challenges the conventional norm in innovative companies today, in which you all come together, brainstorm together, and then you idea. But actually, we do it the other way around. Here is the moment where co-creation happens. You build because you don't lose those valuable fringe ideas that might come from individual reflections. And then really what you're looking for is people that can build, test, iterate, seek answers to those unsolved problems, and begin to collaborate on the ideas of others. So, they're able to generate individually, but also co-create and collaborate and build and test and iterate in a safe environment, and start to transform those ideas into workable solutions.
One of the key words there, Adam, you used was collaboration, because it gets used an awful lot, but how many people actually ever stop and think about, what it means? It doesn't just mean getting a bunch of people in a room. It's about really thinking very carefully about how you deploy collaboration and what that means. And in fact, when you've got a group and when you do what you say, which you do it on an individual level, and then you sort of start to share that and build on that, that's where the real exponential effects of idea generation can start to come in, and where we can actually start to get to breakthrough results. And this is part of where the payoff comes, and actually, what some of the experiments and science behind cognitive diversity is starting to tell us is that, if we can get these profiles right and the right people in the room, solving the problems of the future is going to be so much easier.
If we're able to do that, and essentially that is one of our missions and what we have been able to do as well and demonstrate, which is, what are those differences and what are those unique skills and experiences that people have that make them so unique. And in a way, everyone has value. It depends on where you sit best in this challenge or innovation phase that allows you to shine the most.
Great. So let's move on to evaluation. Can you start to sort of set out how you see the evaluation stage and how it works best and why cognitive diversity is so valuable to the evaluation stage?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from the first stage where we're going really wide, maximizing cognitive diversity, then going through the deep dive where cognitive diversity is, you need a different level of cognitive diversity, and then opening up the cognitive diversity again. It's almost like this roller coaster that we're going on in terms of where cognitive diversity best sits. You then end up in evaluation. During evaluation, you're really beginning to test the most kind of fruitful ideas. And in that way, you actually start needing to think about those ideas very differently. You need to start bringing in the healthy skeptics, the critics, the people who might have a specialist knowledge about a market or industry that allows them to think about, okay, if we have this idea, what does that actually mean? How do we is this actually going to work? Yeah, it's that critical perspective that really shines here about being able to see the bigger picture, having that knowledge, being able to be critical, being open to that. And we know there are kind of lovers and carers and natural skeptics, and these kind of people tend to fall on a line. But if you can begin to identify, are you someone who prefers to co-create, or are you someone who prefers to challenge and critique? This is actually where those people really sit best. They can select, test, and transform those best ideas in a way in which they can be really implemented and reflected in the world for new consumers as well.
And I think one of the really important things here is, there are industry standards and everyone loves to have a poke at focus groups, but there's a very good reason why that is. Because as we know, focus groups and managers, or focus groups actually can affect bias in the same way as managers are. And back to the point we made earlier about if you are an early stage innovator, if this idea is going to be 3 to 5 or 5 to 10 years out, how are you going to, so often novel ideas get rejected. And we know from some of those ideas that get rejected are actually some of the most valuable breakthrough ideas. So, what can we do within that team? Because we know from work that we have seen and that we have researched that actually creators are better at seeing the potential of novel ideas. So yes, it's about having a very grounded, sort of critical view of that product from a practical perspective. But at the same time, it's about having that vision so we don't get a false negative.
And that's where challenge becomes even better, because when you have a homogenous group, people are thinking the same, they're not seeing those potential flaws. Or when you have people or an environment doesn't allow for challenge to happen, those things can go overlooked. And the worst thing for an organization is to get to the evaluation stage, or and to pass through ideas that actually don't reflect what consumer needs, or they're really unimplementable. And this is where you really need to start thinking really critically, because this is where the cost comes even further, bringing in ideas that don't work, they're not reflective.
Now that we've walked through the stages, let's take a leap into the future. Where do you see future applications of cognitive diversity? How will it make the world a better place, or the workplace a better place to work for people or collaborate with each other?
I think we've kind of touched upon some of this, but the closest thing that we're working on and that what we're seeing is that how do we enable people to identify their individual strengths, where they fit into these innovation projects, and in a way recognize their superpowers. If we can profile individuals and understand the magic that causes them to think differently, and this is essentially what we've been doing, and how we're kind of developing our psychometric profiling tools and our applied innovation tools, both for using machine learning and kind of typical kind of statistical modeling, is that we are identifying these people and we're figuring out and challenging the paradigm in which creativity only comes from a set of lone geniuses in the world. Actually, everyone has their creative strengths. If we can do that, we can profile individuals, we can profile teams, and we can begin to see and change how innovators innovate by viewing a team as not a static thing that stays the same over time, that people can get pulled in and pulled out and revisited and revamped and through different stages. We actually start to kind of build our teams much better, but also tailor our teams around that cognitive diversity score that we're seeing, the optimum level of cognitive diversity for your challenge. We can identify that and begin to apply it to different innovation stages and different innovation challenges. And in a way, we allow organizations and leaders to find the right people in their organizations to bring in at the right time to solve the problems of the future.
Yeah, and I think what you're touching on here, are some really big macro shifts. So we know that the workplace is changing. We know that the professional gig economy is upon us, and there is much more fluidity. So when we're talking about teams, we're talking about dynamic teams. You might have the core team, but who are the people that come in on a sort of activity basis to come in and sort of join that team to create a particular profile and then move away again? So how do we get them in there quickly and, so they can be fulfilled in the activities they're doing and feeling that they are giving their best based on their superpowers and how they go away? And then what we're also doing is, we know there's been a huge rise in organizations being very self-conscious about their, DEI scores. And I think this starts to level it up. What this starts to do is we start to see people, for all of the value that they bring, as opposed to what can be in many cases just a cynical box ticking exercise. And how do we actually elevate that to see people's strengths for what they are? And I think, and that's again, in the age of artificial intelligence, with what's happening with Chat GPT, it's doing remarkable things. But then how do we as humans remain competitive? It is our ingenuity. So how can we start to use technology so we can combine our ingenuity as human beings to even be, more powerful and make bigger creative leaps? And I think these are some of the things that really excites me. It's like, what can we do with our collective intelligence? And, our particular lens on that is, just the potency of getting the levels of cognitive diversity right. Because I think the implications go way beyond innovation as well. I think it will, this could profoundly change the way that actually organizations organize themselves. And I think that for me is one of the most exciting things that we're sort of beginning to peer into at the moment. So Adam, I always wrap up by asking the question, how could listeners or the Sense Network get involved or be a part of the work that you're doing around this research and development?
We're really on this mission together. So the Sense Network we want to bring them on the journey with us. They're everything that, they're incredibly valuable, interesting, amazing community and people that we have, and we're really looking more and more to better understanding how this network and how the people in the network are so great and are so creative, and what they're bringing to the table in terms of innovation projects and the way that they're seeing things. So we have developed the next stage of our psychometrics, which assesses and better understands the next level of cognitive diversity and creative intelligence in the Sense Network. So if you're listening and you want to become involved and you're really interested in this work, take that survey, because really what we're going to do with that survey is enable people to better understand these creative traits. So you'll get a profile of where your strengths are, where your areas of development are, where you sit best in the innovation teams. You're more likely to be involved in our projects because we can better place you, and it has a lot of value in terms of where we can kind of enhance and bring you in to shape the future of all the amazing organizations that we work with, be it technology or skincare or snacking. All of these things, your active Sense Network are actively engaged in these things, and how can we utilize them? So please fill in the survey, take 10 to 15 minutes, no more than that. And that'll be really amazing to get as many people as we can on this mission to help shape the future and how people innovate.
So a win-win. You get to learn something about yourself, and we get to better understand how we can find cool stuff for the Sense Network to do that they'll enjoy doing. As always, that's what really our motivation is how can we get more cool stuff for the network to do. Thank you, Adam. It's been a great conversation. I feel that there's going to be a part 2 to this at some point, but until then, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Extreme Perspectives, brought to you by Sense Worldwide. We'd love you to join this conversation using the hashtag Extreme Perspectives. If you enjoyed it, leave us a review. The Sense Network collaborates with many of the world's most innovative companies to help them be more innovative. Join us at thesensenetwork.com or get in touch via email hello@senseworldwide.com.